How are you?
Hi, everybody.
Jared, how are you?
Good. We're all a little early, but we could get started early if you guys want. I would love to hear who, where you're connecting from and what interests you in tonight's topic.
I'm from York, Pennsylvania. York is a little town between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, north of Baltimore. And I have an amateur study interest in philosophy, um, and it free will is one of the great persistent debates. Um, I'm willing to acknowledge that it would be difficult for me to know whether I had free will or not, but it sure seems like I have had it. And so that's the start of my interest.
Cool. Yeah, it is like science seems to say that we don't, and yet we all inherently feel like we do. So I understand why there's this conflict. I used to think we don't, and now I think I've logically proved myself wrong. And I'll give an overview of the argument, but you probably weren't here for the original presentation of the argument, which was more or less an hour long, and I'm going to give like a 5 to 10 minute summary. So I won't expect you to be convinced, but I will share the full essay, which is my most well vetted essay defending that we have free will. If you're interested in reading it, I'll put it in the chat.
Yes, give it a course number. Is it a 100 level essay or is it
I
an
make
800?
everything as easy to understand as
Oh,
possible.
great.
I
Okay.
I'm a big believer of if you don't understand something well enough to explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it well enough at all.
Who said that?
It was supposedly Einstein, but I think it was a misattribution. I don't think he actually said it, but I love the quote, so I say
Yeah,
it
yeah,
anyway
yeah, yeah. It's powerful.
because I think whoever said it, it's great wisdom. So yeah,
All right, so I've opened that link. I'm going to do that after this meeting. Thank you
yeah,
for that.
so it is a little dense, and so it should be understandable. But if you have trouble with anything, just like add a comment and say, "Hey, what do you mean by this?" Like I will respond to those, and I want feedback about where I can make it easier to understand. It should be a 101 level course to answer your question, which took me a while to answer, but it should be a 101 course.
Good, good.
Yeah, but it is trying to answer a millennia old topic, so it's ambitious, but it should be easy to understand.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure. Anyone else want to say where you're connecting from and what interests you in tonight's topic?
I'm connecting from rural Michigan, and what I'm interested in with respect to free will is what can possibly be meant by free will. I don't know how you can say that a choice that a person makes is free. In what sense is it free? But I don't want to get into my argument, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so that's what I try to explain in this essay, which I would encourage you to read as well. I define free will in a way that I think is actually more specific and actionable than, and Don John, I put the essay on free will in the chat. You had asked for it somewhere else, although I'm about 600 emails behind. I'm not exaggerating. I'm literally 600 emails behind. I rested a bit today because I was getting over a cold. I was trying to beat the cold, and the rest actually helped me beat the cold, I think. So anyway, so Albert, if I'm right, we do actually have free will in a tangible sense and a way that I define, that I think is more actionable and specific than the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy definition of free will, which I thought was a little bit loosey-goosey, but I'm still aligned with it. I got a little more specific than they do. And I have a lot of admiration for the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It's my Bible for philosophy. So it is the authoritative source. But I think free will, since I've been studying it for a long time, I think I can do a little bit better than their free will definition. So that said, tonight is not going to be about defending that we have free will. We're going to have to, for tonight, anyone that doesn't think we have free will, most people who think that we don't have free will, libertarian free will agree that we should act like we have free will even if we don't. So for tonight's purposes, just assume we're at least acting like we have free will, and I'll talk about how strong that free will that we're acting like can be on influencing our decisions. So but that said, I'd love to hear from more people about where you're connecting from and what interests you in tonight's topic.
My name's Mike Sarn. I'm connecting from rural Houston, Texas tonight, Grand Prairie to be specific. And I thought the subject, I guess I'm out of touch because I thought the subject was going to be Heisenberg, but I guess I might have missed a week.
That was last week, Mike. Sorry you missed it.
Okay. I noticed coming in today that that you're also there's a connection through Meet.Google. Is that old or?
There shouldn't be a Google Meet. Let me check if
Well, somehow I clicked on it. It isn't through. I didn't log on through the meetup. I logged on through something that you sent out a while back.
Yeah, I have a calendar invite for people that are on the mailing list, which if anyone wants to be on that, I'm happy to add you. But yeah, my version doesn't have that, so I don't like Google has too many bugs. I don't know what to say for a company that makes as much money as they do and has such good engineers. They have more bugs than I'd like to see there. But just always go to the Zoom, Mike, is the
Zoom
short.
Zoom they charge for, and
Not you. No, they don't charge you. They charge me.
they charge you,
Yeah.
and it's a wholly owned subsidiary of the Chinese army. So that's why
Zoom?
some people don't use it.
I don't think Zoom
People,
is a subsidiary of the Chinese army. Can you
uh,
send a source for that, Mike? I don't think that's true. I
no,
think
it's
that might
I
be fake
probably
news.
can't. I probably can't. I can send the source, but it's probably not an authoritative source.
I would guess that that's a fake news event. I don't think that's real.
Well, it has some basis in support in the sense that Cisco WebEx, the employee who was working on Cisco WebEx,
Mike,
got
let's not go
funded.
into we're going down a rabbit hole here. I don't want to do that tonight. We're gonna stay focused. But feel free to put the source in Discord. And we can evaluate that. Oh God, Nancy Pelosi said that. Come on. She should be smarter than that, but so apparently Nancy Pelosi said it, but I think that's nonsense. It's a publicly traded US company. So, thank you, Katie, for putting the source out there about where Mike might have gotten it. Seems like we have some people in important places giving misinformation. Tim, you had your hand up. I'd love to hear from you. Sorry, I didn't call on you. I didn't get the chance before someone spoke up. So, did you want to introduce yourself and what interests you in tonight's topic and where you're connecting from? Oh, thank you for reminding me, Kay, of making people co-host. I forgot to do that. Tim, you're on mute. I don't know if you meant to be talking, but Tim, right?
Okay.
There we go. Now we can hear you.
Yeah, now I'm all set. Yeah, I was just gonna follow up on Albert and say I'm also from Michigan, Ann
Cool.
Arbor. I'm
Michigan
similarly
represent.
skeptical.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. Did you also want to say what interests you into tonight's topic? For some reason you got muted. I don't know if you muted yourself or if someone muted you, but I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
Yeah, I muted myself so that I would not do feedback. Am I gonna have troubles unmuting myself every time I want to stop talking?
No, you should. You are you saying you didn't mute yourself on purpose?
I did mute myself on purpose.
Okay. I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, every time I mute myself on purpose, when I try to unmute, it says that I cannot do that.
That's weird. Let me see if I oh yeah, that I made a mistake. That's my fault. So now you'll be fine. I'm multitasking and removing as many permissions as I need to prevent Zoom bombers from having a big effect.
All right, you got
So
it.
yeah, so now everybody can unmute. I got that confused with the one right next to it, which is rename themselves. Because they renamed themselves after they Zoom bomb so that you can't figure out which person it was that caused the trouble. So what interests you in tonight's topic, Tim?
Oh, I don't know. I'm interested in all sorts of philosophy and just kind of interested in general. Been interested in free will for a long time, though.
Cool, excellent. Well, this is I think the end of our series on free will. And I started presenting my argument defending free will, and then I basically talked about all the implications of that. We did 1 week on the double slit experiment. We did another one on Heisenberg uncertainty principle and quantum mechanics, which was last week. And then today is, a lot of people say, well, yeah, maybe we have free will, but it's so infinitesimally small, that free will, that it's really not worth talking about. And so today I'm going to try to give a counterexample to that and show examples of where free will, overrode almost, had more impact than nature and nurture. And you'll see, I'll try to make that argument. I have to actually pull up the, here we go. So anyone else want to introduce themselves and where you're connecting from and what interests you in tonight's topic? Yeah, Jamie.
How's it going, guys? My name is Jamie, and my wife Christina is next to me. We're from Buffalo area, and I used to be in Rochester. We'd go to philosophy. There was a philosophy group in Rochester. It stopped. They stopped getting together, and we moved here anyway. But I studied philosophy in school. My wife studied physics, and she's a physics teacher now. But it's just been so long since we've had any kind of group to talk philosophy. So it's great that we have this. Free will in particular is just something that interests me. A lot of philosophical topics, both of us, it interests us. So thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming. This is exactly why I started the group originally, is like this the Freethinker Institute came out of my hosting philosophy discussion groups in New York City in person, and then I kind of expanded the scope of what I was doing to make it bigger and broader. And so that's where we've kind of come to where we are today, and hopefully it'll just keep getting bigger and broader. But so thanks for coming. And there's also a Discord community, which, if you're interested in chatting philosophy between these Tuesday evening sessions and having more one-on-one conversation, Discord can be a good way of doing that.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. My wife found this, and yeah, I was telling her about maybe I should look on Discord as well.
Cool. I'll put some links to learn more about the FTI into the chat. And anyone else, yeah, Don John, good to see you, buddy.
Sorry, I was trying to figure. All I want to say is I'm excited about this. I wanted to come to this is only the second meeting you've had on the free will stuff. Is that right?
I think it's the fourth, actually. I presented defending free will, and then I presented how free will explains the complexities of the double slit experiment in 1 week, and then the confusion that the Heisenberg uncertainty principle confuses scientists as well. And I explained how free will explains not only that, but also quantum mechanics, which Feynman said, anyone who says they understand quantum mechanics doesn't understand quantum mechanics. I tried to claim that I do understand quantum mechanics and I can justify that. But, I'm not a quantum mechanics specialist. And I would be curious for Jamie's wife, if she watches that, if she can give me any feedback about whether or not I really do understand quantum mechanics and the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So it could make for a good conversation.
No, I was just curious because you had a meeting on December 6th, 26th, right after Christmas, that I wanted to come and then I missed. Was that the last meeting on it? The only reason I'm curious is I hadn't had a chance to read your articles or your papers.
That's
which-
okay. The homework isn't necessary for attendance.
Oh,
You
I
can
mean,
always
I'd
come
like to
without
do it.
doing the homework.
I'd
Homework is
like to. But
optional with the
anyway, thanks for
FTI.
hosting this.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone that I do and don't know.
Great. Good to have you done, John. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Neil, do you want to introduce yourself, where you're connecting from, and what interests you in tonight's topic?
Yeah, sure. This is Neil. I'm coming from the Philadelphia suburbs in Pennsylvania. And as far as the topic, just something I thought I'd like to learn about. Not sure if I'm really that familiar with it, to be honest. So we'll see if I can keep up with everybody.
It's pretty straightforward. We usually try to make these presentations very approachable, so I hope that it won't there won't be anyone that is lost or confused, although I have gotten feedback that some of the double slit, we try to send a survey out afterwards, and some people felt like the double slit experiment and quantum mechanics one was a little complicated for them, but we also had other people say that it was very easy to understand. So, we try to strike a balance in teaching things that are new and interesting, but also trying to make it very approachable. So, and you weren't on, I don't think, when I gave the quote, or I referred to the, I believe, misattribution quote from Einstein. I don't think Einstein really said it, is that if you understand something well, you should be able to explain it to a 6-year-old. And so we try to, act upon that policy of like, let's make it easy enough that a child can understand it. Luckily, I have 2 6-year-olds that I can practice on, and my daughter likes to have what we call our talks before bedtime, which she asks sort of interesting questions about how things work and life. So, my little philosopher in training. So, anyone else want to introduce themselves and what interests them in tonight's topic? Yeah, Rehan. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. Let me
Great.
make sure. Yeah, it's on. Sorry, my lighting is really garbage.
It's okay.
But yeah, I'm excited. This is my first time being here. And my interest is just kind of like, as I'm in undergrad right now, I'm looking for a therapy degree. And I think free will is kind of like needed in that realm right now. It's getting
Yes.
things are getting very out of hand with the
Yes.
mental health sphere. So yeah, I'm glad you're doing this because it's hard to find discussion groups, and especially me. Like, I'm in Delaware, I'm in America. I have like nobody to do this stuff with.
Well, I would love to be a community that you can geek out with. We love to geek out with each other in these sessions, and join the Discord community. If you saw the link in that FTI link that
I
I
did.
put.
Yeah.
With that?
No, yeah, I did. I was gonna ask, how do these meetings run? Is it like you give a lecture and then there's a discussion period?
Exactly right. So there will
Okay.
be a presentation. Tonight's is going to be pretty short, 13 slides, but probably less than 25 minutes is my guess. Sometimes they go up to an hour, but pretty much after the presentation, it's all, Q&A, people sharing other opinions, why they agree or don't agree with different things, and it's conversation. So yeah, that's exactly the format. Now, the Discord allows for easier everyone interacting with each other. We try to do that here too, but a lot of people don't speak up. But we do allow people in the Q&A section to talk to each other. Usually I try to address the person specifically to make sure that someone is addressing them, but everyone's welcome to speak up, with quick responses or questions on the topic that's brought up by the person who raises their hand. I'll go into all this after the presentation.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And John asked for a link to the presentation on free will. I'll put that in again. I put it in earlier, but this is essay defending free will. This is the second essay that I wrote, and it's had a major revision and a lot of little revisions based on people's feedback. But it's not done yet, and I welcome feedback. So feel free to add comments for anyone that reads it. When you add comments in the Google Doc, I'll get notified and then I'll respond to them. If there are parts where you just don't follow how I get from step A to step B, just let me know that, and I'll add clarity and make it easier for people to understand. So yeah. Karnina, did you want to introduce yourself? Karenina? Is that right?
No, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. I thought you were speaking, so I just didn't want to, I wanted to give you a chance to talk if you wanted. Nina, if you're in New York City, you should come to our in-person meetups. We have them every month. If you, let me put my email in the chat. For anyone in New York City, email me if you want to get invited to the New York City meetups. We meet up in person every month, and have food, drink, and philosophy. Sometimes I have a drink with me tonight, but I'm getting over a cold. So, yes, Will, you're totally welcome. If I still have a free bedroom, you're welcome to stay in it, in my apartment in New York, although I'm trying to rent it. I think it's a little bit after 7, so that's when we get started. So I'm going to go ahead and I asked all of you to introduce yourselves, so I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Garrett Lang. I'm your host for the evening. I'm a software developer turned software inventor and now entrepreneur with a food tech company. My hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy, one of my many hobbies. And I'm also the executive director of the Free Thinker Institute, which is the organization that brings you tonight's event. We advertise to a lot of different meetups, but the FTI is the sort of core of what core organization that's bringing you tonight's event. So we want to really one of the purposes of the FTI is to help members be the best version of ourselves, to seek truth and to be fair. And we do that through transformational personal and professional development. And so if people are interested in being a member of the FTI, there's not a fee for that right now. It's just like a way of personal growth and development, like a path of personal growth and development and a peer mentoring group. We have free events like this one every Tuesday evening, covering a wide range of topics not typically covered widely in academia or industry. And we have those weekly members only events to apply practical wisdom into excuse me, into our daily lives. We only have one rule in the FTI, and luckily people are really good about enforcing it, or like self-enforcing it at our events. And very rarely do I have to step in, which is actually super impressive as to the group of people that we attract to this organization, because we have talked about the most divisive subjects known to mankind, free will being one of them, by the way, for those of us into philosophy. People get very passionate about free will, even though most of us will largely say that it's a theoretical argument, because even like 90% of the people that don't believe we have free will think we should act like we have free will anyway, that we don't have libertarian free will. But that said, the one rule is to remain polite. And what that does is it keeps us all in the logical portion of our brain so that we're listening with an open mind. We have what we call the 5 intentions in the Free Thinker Institute, which are the common values of the organization. And the first one is to be the best version of yourself, seek truth, and be fair. The second one is to transparently share your ideas with other people, but also to have an open mind when other people may point out that you're wrong. Everybody has a certain amount of confirmation bias where we want to believe we're right. But I would like to say it's okay to admit you're wrong, because when you admit you're wrong with good judgment, you're immediately more right than you were before. So there's no harm or fear to admit that we're wrong. It's a good thing. It helps us get closer to the actual truth rather than our former misunderstanding of the truth. That said, if you strongly disagree with someone, what I recommend doing is asking them with empathy why they came to their conclusions, rather than telling them they're wrong and why you think they're wrong. You don't learn much from that. Whereas trying to empathize with someone you disagree strongly with, the more you disagree with them, the more you have to learn from them about why they came to such a different conclusion than you. So we call that in the FTI listening to understand, where we're listening to other people to understand where they're coming from. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And
can I say something?
Yeah, please, Michael, go ahead.
Okay. Right now, we like to know people's feedback about these meetings. Right now, in chat, I'm going to post a link that we asked everybody to take the time to fill out a post-meeting review or post-meeting evaluation. I'm going to post it now, and I'll post it again later. So it's coming up in the chat right now. Okay,
We may want to post that again a little bit later in the session so that people will have experienced the event a little more
Oh,
before
I'm
they.
gonna do it
But
later.
it's good to put it in there, Michael. If people can like add that to your browser and just remember to fill it out after the event is over. We really value your feedback. We want these events to be useful and fun for people, and we do read the results of the survey, and when there are consistent results, we take action on them. So. And part of, we used to do breakout sessions, but we got more feedback that people wanted to be in a large group. So we've been doing it in a large group. So stuff like that, all the feedback is welcome. If we get enough people asking for breakout sessions, I may, switch to both breakout sessions and a large group at the same time, where some people can stay in a large group and other people can do breakout sessions after the initial presentation. So that was just an idea that I had, and I'd be curious if people want to give feedback on that in their feedback, whether or not that would be useful. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Let me, don't mind my ridiculous number of tabs. You would be surprised at how many other browsers I have open. So there we go. All right, so we're going to talk about nature and nurture, nature versus nurture. The way that I saw the world when I was young was nature versus nurture. And then we're going to talk about a summary of my argument defending free will. It's only going to be a summary. I don't expect it to convince anyone. It's just going to be so you understand where I'm coming from at a high level. But reading the actual essay on free will might be more convincing than the summary. If you have an open mind to it, and if you find a reason I'm wrong, I'm very open to that too. I'll just change the essay. Then I'm going to talk about nature, nurture, and free will, how I think they're all three in effect, and then we'll go into Q&A. So first of all, nature and nurture. Nature is how we were born, like our genes, for example, and nurture is influences during our lives. So how we were raised as children, significant influences throughout our lives. When I was a determinist atheist, I wondered, how much of like my decision making could be attributed to nature versus nurture, and what percentage was nature and what percentage was nurture. And I didn't even entertain the possibility of free will because science has proven so much over the last 500 years, and quite frankly what I learned in school sort of seemed to indicate that determinism was the right answer. And so I just kind of said, hey, well, this is what I'm being taught, and this is what seems to have it seems like science has most of the answers going on here. So I thought science would eventually have all the answers. Now I've since proven myself wrong, and I can go into a little bit about why. I learned about a computer science theorem, 400 level computer science theorem called Gödel's incompleteness theorem. And I realized as soon as I learned about that algorithm and that theorem, I realized that determinism can't be right and have that theorem be right. And so I immediately went about trying to prove Gödel wrong because I had confirmation bias too. And so I wanted to believe I was right as a determinist. So I tried to prove Gödel wrong, and quite frankly, after a tiring battle, Gödel won, even though he was dead. He was a little smarter than my 21 or 22-year-old self, quite a bit smarter. Quite frankly, he was like a very genius level guy, good friends with Einstein. And so basically, we're just going to assume that this argument is true for tonight's discussion. But if you don't want to believe it's true, that's okay. But just pretend that there is such a thing as free will for tonight's discussion, because I'm going to talk about how powerful how powerful free will is in some cases. And in order to show free will is powerful, all you really have to do is show that it's powerful in some cases, because not everybody exerts their free will. And I like to joke to friends that are determinists is like, no, you don't. Yes, you're right. You don't have free will, because the only people that really have free will are those of us that use our free will and know that the only people using our free will are the ones that know we have it. So if you don't think you have free will, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you'll act like you don't, and therefore you don't. In some respects, you'll do whatever's easiest and most convenient based on your nature and nurture, the most probabilistic outcome at the time. And so I'm digressing a little bit. Let me go through the argument. So basically, Gödel's incompleteness theorem proves two things. Proves that logical systems. So if you have a logical system, it proves that it's either inconsistent or incomplete. What that means is that for any logical system, there is no logical system that can answer true every truth that is, exists, um, and be consistent. So like it can either answer true everything that is true, but sometimes it will answer true things that are false, or it will always be consistent and it'll answer true only things that are true, but it'll be incomplete, meaning there are certain things that are true in the universe that black box can't, that logical system can't prove true. And then what I basically did is I did what's called problem transformation in computer science, and I showed how the universe itself is essentially a logical system. And the way that I did that is I said, well, look at the time right now in the universe at time t, which is what we call the current moment in time, and you take the entire universe, which I think personally is infinite, but that's another story for another day. I presented that at another topic as my hypothesis on the origins of the universe. But basically, if you take the entire universe at the current moment in time, and then you take the next infinitesimally, the smallest unit of time is called the Planck length of time. If you take the universe at the next Planck length moment in time, something had to get us from this moment in time to the next Planck length in time. And that, I would say, is what we typically refer to as the laws of physics, not our understanding of the laws of physics, right? The laws of physics don't care whether we understand them or not. They still do what they're going to do. So what I'm talking about is the actual laws of physics. Now, if the actual laws of physics were the only thing making the next moment in time come about and the mass energy configuration of the universe at the next moment in time, then the laws of physics would be a perfect black box, because you would be answering every question answerable in the universe, because we're assuming a physicalist perspective here where all that exists is the physical universe. And so this is called the proof by contradiction, where I'm assuming that the entire universe is only determined by the logical system of the laws of physics that take us from the current state of the universe to the next moment in the universe. And the truth is, that's impossible, because there is no perfect logical system that can answer true every truth that exists. And so that basically means that something that's not physical, because if it was physical, it would be part of that logical system, and or randomness must exist. And the type of problem that Gödel pointed to that was unsolvable by these consistent systems, I refer to as self-defining problems or self-defining entities, is what I say exists in the universe. And that opens up the door logically for both randomness and free will. Now, I had never had the door open for randomness and free will until I learned about Gödel's incompleteness theorem. And I would imagine that the same is probably true for a lot of you that hadn't heard of it. But once you know about this particular application of Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which I believe is novel, I think I came up with it. At least I haven't had anyone tell me that it existed before I wrote this essay in 2007, then you know that either randomness and or free will is a part of the next moment in time. Once you know that there's a possibility that we do have free will and a metaphysical essence of ourself, because the free will has to have some origin, and if that origin was physical, then we wouldn't be it wouldn't qualify as a non-physical self-defining entity. So basically, once the door is open for free will, I would argue that there are two possibilities: either randomness randomly evolved in such a way that we think we have the illusion of free will, but really our free will is random decisions that are going on. And I'd argue if you look at a random number generator and you choose numbers yourself, you feel like you're in control of choosing the numbers. Whereas when you see a random number generator, it's very clear that it's random. So I think there's a very clear difference between randomness and free will. And if the door is open for free will, like I think it is with this application of Gödel's incompleteness theorem, I'd argue that Occam's razor, which says the simplest explanation that explains the phenomena we experience, which is at least the illusion of free will at a minimum, the simplest explanation, if it's possible that we really have free will and a metaphysical essence of ourself, is that we do have free will. And so I think we do. and the truth is, even most determinists will still say we should act like we have free will because we all have a sense that we have free will. They'll just say that we're not really making any decision in a tangible sense, in a libertarian free will sense, which libertarian free will, for those not familiar, just means that given a choice between, Cheerios and cornflakes for breakfast, like the laws of physics can't decide which one, aren't the thing deciding which one we decide to eat. Whereas libertarian free will says we as a human being get to make that non-deterministic decision. And if we like both Cheerios and cornflakes, we get to choose based on our will which one we want to eat. It's not based on nature and nurture. So that said, what I argue is that nature and nurture is a false dichotomy. I think free will not only influences our lives, but it's actually the most influential force in our lives, more influential than nature and nurture. And I'm going to give examples of people who have, and by the way, that's only true for those of us that exert our free will in a significant way. And I'm still working to exert my free will more than I do now. I think that's always a work in progress. I like to say to people, including my kids, don't stress, just do your best and accept the rest. And doing your best, it's hard to do your best at every moment of every day, right? We all fall short of that sometimes, but I think it's good to try our best to do what we think is right. And I'm going to try to show you examples of people who have used their free will to trump nature and nurture today. So let's talk about a few of these questions of like, does a difficult childhood doom us to irrelevance? Is it true? Some would say if you're born to a difficult childhood, you're like very unlikely to succeed, and like theoretically that you can't really be anything great if you have a horrible difficult childhood. Now, there are lots of examples of people who have, I would say, used their free will to overcome those circumstances, which we'll go into. I'm also going to look at I think I have some statistics. I forget if I was able to add the statistics, but let's talk about a child growing up in the South Bronx in a working class family. This child, had a bunch of challenges because in the South Bronx, this was in the mid 20th century, there was a lot of economic hardship, high crime rates, struggling education system, and lots of residents basically had, these challenges to deal with in their nurture. And so economically, lots of working class families were economically challenged, lots of unemployment, low income. The financial constraints basically limited access to quality education, nutritious food, safe housing, and other resources essential for upward mobility. Now, from an educational barrier, the South Bronx historically had some of the most under-resourced schools in New York City, which meant lower graduation rates, fewer opportunities for higher education, and educational disparity made it really hard for people to escape that cycle of poverty that's often talked about. Now, from a crime perspective, there's a huge impact on quality of life and safety. Growing up in that environment can expose young people to violence and crime, potentially leading to involvement in the criminal justice system. A lot of the times, the people who were economically successful were criminals. So the role models that people in these neighborhoods had were, the theoretical role models, the people who looked like they were actually financially well off, were the ones causing crimes. And now health disparities, a lot of health disparities, higher rates of asthma, obesity, chronic conditions, partially due to environmental factors and limited access to healthcare. Let's talk about, wait, okay. So let's talk about someone who grew up in the same neighborhood, basically, and was the son of Jamaican immigrants. His parents instilled in him values in hard work and education, but life was difficult in his neighborhood, as I talked about, the type of challenges that that were present in his neighborhood at that time. Now, he attended public schools. I'm going to talk about a person sort of anonymously, and I'll see if anyone can guess who he is as I tell about his history. He attended public schools. Despite the challenging environment, he kept out of trouble, focused on the future. His academic performance was average in high school, didn't really have a direction in life until he enrolled in college in the City College of New York in the Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC. He had a passion for military service and leadership and excelled in ROTC, finding structure and purpose that really resonated with him. After graduating in the 1950s, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army. His military career spanned 35 years, where he served in various capacities, including 2 tours in Vietnam. His leadership skills and dedication quickly became apparent, propelling him up in the ranks. He had numerous key positions, including National Security Advisor under Ronald Reagan, Commander of the U.S. Armed Forces, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under President Bush, H.W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. As chairman, he played a pivotal role in several military operations, including the Panama invasion of 1989 and the Gulf War in 1991. Now, from a political perspective, he retired from the military in 1993, and his leadership and expertise led him to civilian sector roles, including public speaking, writing, and philanthropy. In 2001, he was appointed Secretary of State by George W. Bush and became the first African American to hold the position. As Secretary of State, he was known for being a consummate diplomat, although he did have some controversy over his promotion of the Iraq War. I looked at that very closely because I really admired this man, and I would argue he did that because he was taking orders to to the president. I don't think he was really a good believer of the Iraq War, but he got a lot of criticism for basically being the guy that promoted the Iraq War. And I think the powers that be knew that no one else would have the how do I say the integrity and the reputation for integrity that he did, and so no one else would be able to convince everyone that it was a good war to go into. I wish he hadn't made that decision. Michael, did you have something you wanted to say? Your hand is up. That's the only reason I asked.
No, I was just gonna mention his name. I'm sorry.
No, don't mention his name yet.
Yeah,
I
no,
want to let people guess.
I'm not going to.
Okay. So so hopefully it got easier as I went on. Basically he passed away in 2021, October 18th. He left behind a legacy of breaking racial barriers, dedicating his life to public service and leadership. In spite of the Iraq War, I consider him one of the people that I think was extremely wise in his time. And his journey from the South Bronx to the highest level of government exemplifies the American dream. And I would argue that only through the level of determination, hard work, and belief in one's ability to overcome circumstances was he able to achieve the level of greatness. So that said, I would say, a lot of people in the type of environment he grew up in would just like not feel like they ever had a chance, and they wouldn't have the wherewithal to get themselves out of that cycle of poverty. So I'm curious if people want to write in the chat who you think that this person was. Maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not. Yes, Mike, that's right. Yep, Dave. So it was Colin Powell. So I would argue Colin Powell had a very strong will and really got himself out of a very difficult situation and went to the highest levels of government. So, and so some people wrote it privately. So, so let's go to another person. So this is a woman, and she exhibited remarkable perseverance and dedication, leading her to become one of the most important positions in the United States. She was born also in the Bronx in New York, raised in a project, predominantly Puerto Rican neighborhood. Her parents moved from Puerto Rico to New York in search of a better life, which is, I would argue, a key free will decision that her parents even moved her to this country to give her the opportunities that she was able to have later in her life. Her father worked as a factory worker. Her mother was a nurse. Early life was filled with challenges. Her father died when she was just 9 years old, leaving her mother to raise her and her younger brother alone. So, just a note to everyone, not all single mother households in lower socioeconomic areas are from broken families. Some are from tragedy. And despite the family's financial hardships, her mother placed a high value on education, which is another key free will decision from the mother, and worked tirelessly to provide for her children. She excelled academically, showing early signs of determination and intelligence that would characterize her career. She graduated as valedictorian from Blessed Sacrament School and then from Cardinal Spellman High School in the Bronx. No using ChatGPT to figure out who this is, by the way. That's cheating. Her academic achievements led her to Princeton University, where she was awarded a full scholarship. At Princeton, a lot of top schools will say, as long as you can get in here, you don't have to pay. And I think that's a great policy where the people like her from socioeconomically challenged backgrounds can get to the top schools and not have a huge amount of student debt that they can't get out from under. So she continued to excel, becoming involved in Latino student groups and advocating for the rights of minorities, graduated summa cum laude in 1976 and went on to Yale Law School, where she was an editor for the Yale Law Journal, received her JD in 1979. After law school, she worked as an assistant district attorney in New York City, gaining experiences in criminal law under District Attorney Robert Morgenthau. She entered private practice, focusing on intellectual property litigation, international law, and arbitration. In 1991, President George H.W. Bush nominated her to the U.S. District Court in the Southern District of New York, making her the youngest judge in the Southern District and the first Hispanic federal judge in New York State. She served in that capacity till 1998, when President Bill Clinton nominated her to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Her confirmation process was contentious, delayed a bit, but ultimately successful. And she served the second court until she got nominated to the Supreme Court in 2009 by Barack Obama. She was confirmed by the Senate, becoming the first Latina Supreme Court justice in U.S. history. Her tenure in the court has been marked by her advocacy of the rights of defendants, her concern for the protection of civil rights, and her commitment to applying the law fairly and empathetically. So if you look at the journey that this woman took, it's from, some of the poorest, most impoverished places of the country, in the Bronx in the 1950s, a father that was a factory worker, a mother that was a nurse, and then went to, the highest court in the land. So feel free to write if you know who this is. I'll give people a second. It was not Jocelyn Elders. And it was Sonia Sotomayor. So good job, guys. And a couple of other people got it too. So I would argue that it takes a lot of determination to come from that kind of background. And it takes conscious choices. It took the choice of her parents to bring her to the US, where they could focus on getting her a better education and getting her into a school that, gave her a full ride scholarship. International students don't get a full ride scholarship. So international students pay full price, even if they're as talented as can be. And so just being in the US gave her an opportunity to go to an Ivy League school that she would never have otherwise been able to afford. So, so I think I've shown that, at least in some examples, free will can be so powerful that it can overcome even extreme situations of difficult nurture environments. But what about nature? So let's talk about nature. So imagine having no arms and legs. Well, if that happens, like, nature has severely limited you, right? Like, there are limitations, there are hard limitations, that the laws of physics will limit us to. We're not going to be able to grow wings. But there are some inspirational people that use their free will to overcome the limitations that they have. And I want to show some examples of some of those people. And I'm going to put the full videos in the chat. I'm just going to do a little bit of the videos because I don't want to take too long on the videos, but I'll at least give you a sense of what people have been able to overcome, which may seem like insurmountable odds for people that have no arms and legs. And so I hope we can admit that that's a pretty, that seems like a pretty, like something that would limit the number of things you can do. There are things that you can overcome, like, eye color, you can get contacts, and later potentially we'll be able to do gene editing to change our eye color. But let's talk about people with no arms and no legs. So, this first person became a wrestler.
It was December 2004 when we traveled to America to meet up.
And I'm going to just go to an example of him wrestling.
Michael Maynard was then an 18-year-old wrestler at the University of Georgia, and his story was one that we were privileged to tell. High school coach Kyle invented moves like the jawbreaker and buzzsaw, designed to take full advantage of his physique and power, even against the heavier opponents he regularly faced for the University of Georgia.
So this is an example of someone with no arms and no legs, but that wrestled for the University of Georgia and was able to defeat people who were heavier than him. I would say that's using your will, and literally made up his own wrestling moves, right? Like that's using your will to overcome a severe nature limitation. Now I'm going to give you another example of a person with no arms and no legs that plays golf, swims, surfs.
It's a long story. She walks busy streets looking for her next meet.
Playing golf. Swimming. I wouldn't jump off of that. I'm not a very good swimmer. And I have arms and legs. And I took swimming lessons when I was young. But this guy is bold. So, I hope that this shows that even though people may have some very big limitations in their nature, those can be overcome with enough willpower. So what I'm trying to make an argument here for is that it's not nature versus nurture, it's free will versus nature versus nurture. And free will is the most important of those three, and actually trumps both nature and nurture in most cases. Now, that doesn't mean you can, currently overcome any limitation in nature and nurture, but it does, we have shown examples of people that overcome very, very severe limitations in a very, very impressive way. And I would argue they did that because they had a strong will. And another thing that I'll mention is, I read a lot of books on leadership as a former Fortune 500 IT leader, and now leader of my own company as an entrepreneur. And so I want to be the best leader I can. And what I've learned is that the number one key to success is not how smart you are. It's perseverance, grit, tenacity, basically your will to go on and continue to get up. And there have been lots of quotes, I forget the exact quote from Edison, but it was something like, in order to, I didn't like fail to make the light bulb 1,000 times. Like something like you have to try 1,000 times in order to succeed once. Someone can put the quote in the chat. You'll know what I mean. But basically, it's being perseverant that leads to success, and that takes a strong will. And so, I would argue that we should all use that will to be our best self. And if you want to apply to be an FTI member, you can help work alongside other people to help us all be the best version of ourselves, to seek truth and to be fair. And so that said, I would love to know whether or not this was helpful. Hands are fine now, although I'm going to give a quick introduction of the Q&A portion of the session, because that's the end of the presentation. Michael, do you want to do it?
Me?
Yeah, do you want to say that? Well, I can do it. It's okay. But if people could just limit comments or questions to one comment or question at a time, and limit the length of the comment or question to 2 to 3 minutes. If you want to respond to what someone just said by asking a clarifying question or making a brief comment, feel free to just speak up after someone talks. As long as you're on the same topic as them, do not introduce a new topic. I will cut you off if you're introducing a new topic. If you want to introduce a new topic, raise your hand and you'll be called in the order of in which people raise their hand. But when you respond to someone else, try to limit it to less than 20 seconds. And then, that way we can have the back and forth dialogue about everybody in the room and, still keep moving forward. So,
May I add to that? May I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and when you make a comment, limit it to one topic. Don't bring up more than one topic in each time you speak.
All right. So, Michael, did you have something that you wanted to bring up with raising your hand?
No, I was going to mention the name Colin Powell, but I
Okay. No problem. Ella, go ahead.
Well, you covered more than one topic, but I'll limit it to one, I suppose. Because your argument, it covers science, physics, as it were, and it also covers human will to get out of poverty, et cetera. So I'll just keep it brief on the science. I don't think the argument is sound in light of the, I see where you're going with it. And I think you did a good job constructing it, but it's a lot more complex than that. I'll leave it at that. My thing I want to develop here is your insights as to the anyone can make it with free will argument.
Oh, I didn't say that. And I wouldn't say that.
Oh, okay. Well, some people can make it, and okay,
Right.
let's leave it at some people, okay, can
Yeah.
make it with free will. Okay. First of all, we have to look at free will. What is it, and have you established an argument for it? Because it's a presupposition, even for Kant. So if that's not established, how can we go on to do that in a comprehensive and responsible way, giving a few examples? You can find
So Ella, I gave the argument defending free will about a month ago. The essay on free will I posted in the chat. So you're welcome to read that. It wasn't intended to be.
I think I was here, but I still don't think it's established. But anyway, I'd like to give my point. You can give examples to show, and these are great examples, to show free will. Not to show free will. I don't believe that was demonstrated, but to show people who have that extra measure of courage to survive certain things and persevere. And that's very admirable. And I would not take away from that for a second. But I think that sets up a situation where, as a society, we don't look at things as John Rawls did, another libertarian, I might add, and one that I respect a great deal, who talked about the veil of ignorance. And with the veil of ignorance, it's just a construct, really, to get you to look at poverty and injustice from other people's points of view, and to construct a society that is economically egalitarian and protects the rights of any vulnerable population. But again, if it's economically egalitarian, and that's its basic premise, is not for many to have to work so hard, most of whom don't make it, as you are probably aware, out of poverty for generations, if then. And to set up that kind of construct and then give a few examples as to, well, this person made it and that person, of course we admire that. But I think we have to, as philosophically, prove that and economically prove that. And I think John Rawls came up with his principle one is to protect the most vulnerable in society, the handicapped, those who may be discriminated against
Try to finish your thought when you can, Ella.
and principle two, egalitarianism, meaning an economic right to develop who you are as a free human being in every respect, intellectually, emotionally. Think of Maslow's hierarchy. And you're not held back by these constraints while others are using your labor and you're working 2 jobs to get through the day. So I don't think you've proven your argument, but with a few examples, I think it's.
It wasn't intended to be a proof giving a few examples. The proof was a month ago, Ella. So.
Okay, well, I mean, I was here and I don't think you proved it at that time, but yeah, that's it. I'll leave it there and thank you for the time.
Thanks. Ella, if you can go through my essay and write where you disagree with me or where you think I'm wrong, I'm very open to the feedback. Oh, hang on one second. I forgot to make someone a co-host. Right. So just to let you know, I covered more than one topic because I was presenting. But really everything was one topic. It was about the strength of the will. Today was not about economic prosperity or any of that. It was only about how strong the will can be sometimes. That was the only point that I was trying to cover. You don't have to limit your comments to one comment at all, Ella. Just one time per raise of the hand. You can comment on as many things as you want. Just raise your hand a second time, and that way we get through all the hands and people take turns and we don't have one person talking too long. But I agree with the veil of ignorance. I agree that we should be economically egalitarian. And in fact, one of the FTI's goals is to bring about a world where every human being makes the equivalent of $100,000 USD a year, which is the point at which more money either doesn't make people happier or only makes people happier with a logarithm of the increase in wealth, which is a minuscule amount of happiness for a large amount of wealth increase. And so I want to bring about that kind of world. So I'm not at all saying that just because these people succeeded, we shouldn't help people that are socioeconomically challenged. I grew up very poor myself, and I have a lot of compassion for people who grow up poor and the opportunities that they're lacking. And so, I'm trying to help people. I teach a product management boot camp, which I don't really have time to do, but I try to do it anyway to get people to 6 figures in a job that they would otherwise have no way to get an education in. And so there's tuition assistance. Someone can come in for $50. They can get a skill set that will get them into 6 figures doing my product management bootcamp. So I agree with everything you said, Ella. I just think you misunderstood what I was getting at tonight. All I was trying to do is prove that the strength of the will is powerful. In some cases, it's more of a philosophical argument that will can be powerful. Does that make sense?
Can I ask Ella a quick question?
Yeah.
Ella, are you freely disagreeing with Garrett?
Well, are you asking if as a host, he's given me that opportunity and that I have taken that initiative? Yes, I guess, or it could be the fact that,
I don't think we agree about much, Ella. I think you disagree that I've proven that there's free will, but other than that, I don't think we disagreed on anything you said.
I don't even think Kant proved there's free will. He accepted it. Here's what I think about free will, because I think there is a modicum of free will. Many things are not of free will. The class you're born into is one of them, and it limits human potential. It's only one thing, okay, of many, many things. So, but do I think there is some free will? Yes, because I want to believe that. I'm choosing to believe that. Does that mean it's fact? In terms of the physical universe? I don't know. I don't think
Well, like
so.
if I was to say, hey, Ella, I believe in free will, and then you say, well, I disagree with it. I would want to know whether you're freely disagreeing with me, because if you're determined to disagree with me, then I don't know why I should listen to you or trust what you're saying. You see what I'm saying?
So you're
Because
saying
if you're
I would have to
determined to,
agree, I would have to agree with you for you to agree with me. And that's what I'm hearing you say.
what I'm saying is that if I held a position that you disagreed with and you said, look, I don't think that's true, and then I ask you, but are you freely disagreeing with me? And you say, well, no, I'm determined to disagree with you. I'm determined to hold the views I hold. If you told me that, then I would say, well, you're just determined to think that. So why would I believe that your arguments are trustworthy?
Oh, I see your argument. Okay. Um,
May I?
all I can tell you is I've thought about it at great length, not just for this meetup, but for years. And you know, I'm somewhere in between the two positions of no free will whatsoever, physicalism, and total free will, which is what I've heard this evening. And I think a more modest answer and position is where I stand. I think a lot of things are determined in the universe. Cause and effect tells me that. And it's very evident in reality, but is there some free will? I do think there is. I choose to think there is. Do I have proof of it? No. And I don't know anyone that does. I'll leave it there.
Okay, so
May I react
I think I
quickly?
do, Ella. I think you need to read the essay and add comments where you disagree with me.
May I very quickly
Yeah,
react
go
to
ahead,
what
Jenny.
you said, Garrett, earlier? I just want to, based on what you just said, I'm sorry that I'm not 18 years old or 20 years old and live very close to you so I can take advantage of your scholarships. And B, I just
There's
loved.
no age limit, Jenny. I'm happy to teach you.
Yeah, because it would be nice if I could make six figures. Yeah.
Reach out to me, Jenny. I'll put my email in again. I would love to teach you. No joke.
No, really? Seriously?
Yep, I'm totally serious.
Oh my goodness. Okay, and then B, I just absolutely loved the photos of the free will. I mean, these people without arms and legs doing what they did. It was just absolutely stunning. Thank you for those videos.
Sure. Let's go to the next person, Dave from Tacoma. How are you, Dave? Good to see you again, buddy.
Great, Garrett, and I enjoyed it. You're bringing up Colin Powell reminded me of two other stories. One that you probably heard of if you're paying attention, and the other is from my hometown. That's also very interesting. I'd like to give a thumbnail sketch quickly for both of them if I could. The first is a book that's marvelous called The Other Westmore. Westmore, I believe, grew up in Baltimore to single mothers. His dad left, they got divorced, and they moved up to New York City. And he got a Fulbright scholarship, Rhodes scholarship. So he was looking in the New York paper to look for his notice of his scholarship, and he saw another Westmore was going to jail. I think may have been death row or not, but serious stuff. And so he talked to this guy and got permission. And the book is both their stories, and each chapter is divided in half. And after a while, you can figure out who's who. And actually, his achievement really is his mother's, because he was going to high school and got in there with the wrong crowd. So she transferred him to another high school, got in there with the wrong crowd again. She transferred him to the most outstanding high school in New York City, got in the wrong crowd again. She finally sent him to a military school in Pennsylvania. I think it's the one who was in Boy's Life all the time. He finally found a mentor and got his acted and turned his life around. And he's now governor of the state of Maryland, Westmore. And the book is The Other Westmore. It's very well written. It's a wonderful story and inspiration. Now, the one I'm talking about I'll put all the names in chat again. Joe B. Anderson. Wrong side of the tracks. Junior high school, my dad taught phys ed and was coach of football, baseball, basketball, this stuff. And Joe Anderson was a great football player. Well, he went to Topeka High School. My high school is, I think, 4 years ahead of me, my sister's class. And my sophomore year of high school, the second assembly, our principal said, well, I'm sorry, I wasn't here for the first assembly. I was back at West Point sitting at the head table for Joe Anderson's recognition. I think the deal was he was named commander of the cadets, highest honor given by the cadets themselves, I believe, even if it was the faculty. One of only 4 African Americans in the whole class at West Point, and I'm not sure how he got the appointment to get there. But then for the rest of the story, as he did well in West Point, and there was a French filmmaker that wanted to do a story about the French involvement in Vietnam, and I think they got kicked out in 53 or whatever, so he didn't get his documentary made. But there's always been a little curiosity in the French of African Americans. So this filmmaker saw about Joe Anderson graduating at the top of his class at West Point or whatever, and followed him to Vietnam and did a story, and it turned into a documentary called The Anderson Platoon.
Try to finish up your thought, Dave, because we're running past the timer now.
Okay. Anyway, it's find Wikipedia, and I think Anderson Platoon's probably on or YouTube. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I do want to reiterate to people, I love these stories, Dave. I think we should look at these stories with admiration, but I don't think it should make any of us feel any less compassion for people growing up with difficult circumstances. Like, we should be helping those people and supporting those people. And that's why, I do what I do in the FTI. I welcome people from socioeconomically challenged backgrounds to join the FTI as members. And we have people that are very successful in life that can help coach and mentor them to get to a better place in life. Like, I want to bring about the kind of change that people from these backgrounds, like I grew up and that Sonia grew up and Colin grew up. I want to help people from those backgrounds be more successful by connecting them with people who already are successful and more advanced in their lives. So just want to be clear on that. So that said, Peter, are you the Peter that has come before? If so, it's good to see you.
Yeah, hi Garrett. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it is. Good to hear
Hey,
your voice.
good to see you. It's been a while. No offense, but I kind of forgot about it, and I got
Okay.
reminded of it. So
Well,
by
we're
a
glad
good
to
friend
have
of
you
yours
back.
in the
If you
group.
want to get added to the mailing list, email me and I'll
Yeah,
add
sure.
you.
If someone could just restart the timer, because I'm not in the negative. There's no way I can be in the negative right now. But anyways, starting right now, so first of all, Garrett, I'm going to try to stay within time frame. So I've actually come to the conclusion that I have actually shifted my mindset on this subject. Okay, maybe I'm the first person. Hopefully, I'm not the only person to admit this. And the reason is because I don't think that the words themselves are really adequate. I sometimes wonder if determinism is the best way to describe that side, and free will is the same thing. Now, no time to explain that, but let me explain some of the definitions that I don't agree with. For example, Sam Harris's definition. I'm sure you know this man. When he says anything along the lines of you have to go back in time and replay, essentially it's replaying the tape, right? When you rewind the tape, you replay the tape. He's wondering if you could hear something that's not within the tape if you rewind it enough. That's essentially his definition of proving free will, which I don't agree with because that's not possible.
Right.
You can't time travel.
Right.
But on the other hand, I really don't think that randomization, I'm not saying you're arguing this. In fact, you didn't say this much. But some people who defend free will, on the other hand, say that randomization proves free will. I also don't believe that either. So there are problems I have with both sides. Now, the remaining time, what I will say is, to go on your examples, there are 3 other examples, right? And one of them is kind of an exception, not from a bad background. His name is Tyrone Royal, a former NFL player turned neurosurgeon, African American. Another one is Ben Carson. This is bigger name. And finally, Jose Hernandez, featured in the movie called A Million Miles Away. A Hispanic American farm worker became a NASA engineer, I think, on the ISS, which are all impressive. Now, that being said, I have to say this. This is not to take away any of their abilities as well, because I think they're extraordinary. In fact, Hugh Thompson is another person. You should look it up yourself. I don't have time to explain. But at the same time, we have to also remember that by the time we're first trimester fetuses, there have already been a lot of things that, again, I don't like to use the term, quote unquote, determined for us, in the sense that when you're born, if you're someone born with genetically predisposed to ADHD, anxiety, or other words you can fill in the gap with mental health disorders, that's not to say it's impossible, but it makes your life very difficult to quote unquote overcome it with free will. Again, I don't like that word either. Maybe I believe in willpower. Maybe I believe in causality. Those are the better words to replace it. So again, in the remaining seconds, I will say that in conclusion, I have changed my mind in this, not in the sense that I believe more in free will, more determinism, but I would like to say that in the most simplest conclusion, I still believe that causality plays more part than sheer will itself. That's it.
So just to be clear, causality and free will are not at odds with each other. I believe firmly in cause and effect. I just believe some cause and effect is non-deterministic, and I believe I've logically proven that with my defense of free will argument. And all that does, Peter, is open up the door for randomness and free will. I don't think the existence of randomness proves free will. I think that I have proved that randomness and or free will have to be present in the universe. And because there's a possibility that either one could be present, I think that the idea that we think we have free will suddenly becomes the most logical explanation for, metaphysically centered free will is the most logical explanation for that. So just to be clear, just to talk about an example, you said, like, if you have ADHD, it's hard to go anywhere. Well, Adam Levine, who's the lead vocalist of Maroon 5, has been very open about having ADHD, and he's a very famous musician. So, I think the example of people with no arms and legs swimming is an even more profound example of overcoming something than ADHD. If I say so myself, I think those are, and I also wanted to give the example as far as, first trimester evolution, which, by the way, the fetus is still in deterministic state in the first trimester. Non-determinism doesn't enter in until the third trimester. So, which is interesting. I think the soul actually enters the body, and I covered this on my conversation about abortion, is that if the soul enters the body in the third trimester, it's not really murder until the third trimester. But that's another story. I don't mean to open that can of worms tonight. Sorry.
And by the way,
Pretend I didn't say that.
Pretend
I didn't say that.
Just a quick reply to that
Yeah,
in
please.
Pretty much one or two sentences to summarize my whole point, in case, because some people's attention span is not as good as others. My overall standpoint is this. I believe, again, I'm not going to use determinism or free will. I believe that we can make changes in our lives, but only within the confines of our biological framework.
Correct. And I agree with that. I think that our biological framework physically limits us. The laws of physics physically limit us. But within that limitation, there's a lot of wiggle room, like a lot. Now, I still think we should help people who don't have the strength of will to get out of the circumstances they're in on their own. And no one really did get on their own. Like people mentioned that Sonia's parents are great, right? And they taught her a lot of great values. And yes, that's true. Like, there was an impact of nature and nurture. I think a lot of people think just because there's free will, that people that believe in free will think that nature and nurture are not a part of people's lives. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. Nature and nurture are still very much a part of our lives, but we can use a very strong will to overcome many, many challenges. And I've given examples of people who overcome great challenges. And I also like to give the example, I forgot to include him in the presentation, but Stephen Hawking, right, had a debilitating disease and was one of the preeminent minds in physics. And even though I disagree with him on certain things, like, the guy was brilliant, and he talked, with his pinky, basically, like, that was his way of communicating with the world, because that's all he could do from his disease. And that's using your free will, and someone that doesn't feel like their physical limitations are going to be their limit. So Carl, go ahead. Good to see you.
Yeah. Hi, good to see you too, Garrett. Great presentation. I just wanted to ask you if you meant with the presentation to prove that free will was more influential than nature or nurture.
Not that it is, but that it can be in some
That it can be.
circumstances. And so
Okay.
all I'm trying to prove is the capability of the will is very great. Now, like I said, and I was half joking, but I'm still actually, there's always a nugget of truth in a joke, right? When I say that to my friends that are determinists, well, you don't have free will. And it's because they just do whatever's easiest. And, because they don't think they have free will, they're not going to exert their will. And so people who think they don't have free will really don't have free will because they're not exerting it. But those of us that acknowledge there's free will and that the stronger you exert your free will, the more likely you can bring about a future that you want to see. Well, we do have free will and we can overcome a lot of our nature and nurture. And there are examples of people, I think I've come a long way for where I started, but I haven't done nearly what the people in those videos have done. Like they are incredible. They have a very strong will, and
Right.
I'm going to try to prove. Go
I
ahead.
was I guess I'm still kind of like a 70% determinist still. But I was the examples that you gave, and I've had plenty of arguments with many friends using actually the same examples you have, especially the guy who swims, Nick. Definitely an
Mind-boggling.
inspiration to anybody who uses their circumstances as excuses to not do anything with their lives. But as you were going through the arguments, I was actually to actually use Gödel's, I think it was an incomplete argument that you had, because when you were giving the examples, in the back of my mind, I was going, oh, well, that's an example of nature. Oh, but that's an example of nurture. Oh, that's an example of nurture. Oh, that's an example of nature. And so I wasn't quite convinced that it was free will. And so, for example, you mentioned in Sonia Sotomayor, her parents bringing her here, that would be nurture. And
Yeah,
I
and
would
I'm not saying
argue
free will had like, but it was nurture, but it was the free will decision of her parents, right? So that was still a free will
Right.
decision of her parents to instill in her good
Right.
values.
Okay, yeah, I'll take that. And then, but there's also intelligence, and
Yes.
it could be argued that intelligence, as for example, Colin Powell, and believe me, I mean, I'm kind of on your side when there's millions of examples of people who have overcome their nature, overcome their, maybe not their nature, but maybe overcome their nurture for sure, their environment. But I would argue that free will and grit and determination and all that courage to do something with yourself, to put yourself by the bootstraps despite your circumstances, are actually nature, because they relate to the big five personality, which includes will, I think, and determination. So I would argue that free will, or what we think is free will, or the way you think of free will, would be actually part of your personality, which would be nature, if that makes sense.
Conscientiousness, I think you're talking about in the big five.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that might be
well, and among other
conscientiousness.
things, extroversion, conscientiousnness, agreeableness, all that stuff. With all of these could actually, whether they were determined in the womb, on the fetus stage, or by nature altogether, are more examples of nature and nurture. And we still argue which one is more powerful. We know it's both, but I'm wondering if actually what we think is free will is actually free will, because I haven't been convinced yet. So that's all I wanted to say.
No problem. I would encourage you to read the essay that I posted. If you didn't see it, take a look at that.
Yeah, no, I did download it. Yeah, but I definitely want to read it for sure.
Cool. Don't download it. Edit the Google Doc version, because then I'll see your comments, and I value the comments that people have. Because if there's a point where you don't see me going, like, it's a very sequential, logical argument, like step A to step B to step C to step D. If I miss you from step C to step D, add a comment there and say, hey, Garrett, how did you get from this sentence to the next sentence? And I'll add more detail.
Okay, sounds good. Cool.
I wrote it in the same level of scrutiny as a computer science proof when I was in college, which I got A's on. It's a pretty, but there's still room for elucidating. So, some
and
people
for psychology to get into
what's
that.
that?
And for psychology,
right,
factors, which I think all those examples, I would argue that psychology had a more influence than
well, I
free
would
will.
argue psychology is the study of free will. Like the
Right.
reason that psychologists have so much trouble making sense of human behavior is they're mostly determinists. If they acknowledge that people actually make free will decisions, I think they would have breakthroughs in the study of psychology. So
Yeah.
I'm going to see that coming hopefully in my lifetime, that psychologists start doing that. But as soon as psychologists start acknowledging free will, there are going to be major breakthroughs in that field. And there haven't been major breakthroughs. I don't consider the big five like a major breakthrough. Like I really enjoyed, like learning more about it. And like, I got more value from, was it you that presented on the big five?
Yeah. Yeah.
I got
There's
more
also
value
positive
out of,
psychology as well.
yeah, I got more value out of it when you presented it than I had believed there was in it before that. So I appreciate your presentation. But I don't think that's the Rosetta Stone. I think that's
And
still
there's
coming.
also the upcoming self-actualization one, which will also cover a lot of stuff.
Yes, which I want to encourage people to attend. It's coming up soon, and I actually want to get the next week's session advertised. So thank you, Carl and Albert.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Albert,
Can you
you're on mute.
unmute?
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, the examples that you've given of free will are examples of the overcoming of circumstances, natural and cultural. What I had in mind was what you might call a stronger definition of free will, a more radical one, more metaphysical one, namely, the making of a choice that is not determined by what came before it, a choice out of nothing, a choice ex nihilo, as it were. In the stories that you've given, you could say that those people got to where they were because of everything that happened in their lives, because of their entire journey, as you called it before. And to demonstrate that free will, in the sense in which I'm using the term, as a radical choice that is not determined by what came before it, that it is much more difficult to argue that that was involved.
So you're saying that a free will decision had no basis in nature or nurture?
Yes, that's what I would say is the strong sense of free will, something that does not have basis, may not be the word, but something that is not caused by anything that came before the decision, the choice.
Yeah, so I think that the decisions that these people made were not caused by deterministically their nature or nurture, but this is where you'll have to kind of read the essay Defending Free Will in order to believe me. I didn't try to give a comprehensive recounting of that because it took me an hour to do the night I did it, and that was about a month ago. This is one of the follow-on sessions to that to show the implications of that defense of free will. And so I would encourage you to read the essay and add your comments to that. That is the defense that there is some sense of free will. Tonight was just about saying, people like Ella who say, well, there's some free will, but it's tiny, it's infinitesimal. Well, if there was only infinitesimally free will, how could a guy with no arms and legs start swimming? Like, how could that come about? Like, the chances of that happening, without immense effort and time and, courage are infinitesimally small. So if there was only a tiny bit of will, how is it that everybody else with no arms and legs didn't do that and this one guy chose to?
Well, I think that all your stories were admirable, of admirable people. My only point is that there's no way to tell that those, whatever choices they made, were not caused by what they were thinking. I mean, people make choices because of what they think. Think in the sense it could be because of what they fear, what they feel. But in as long as that nexus is unbroken, it's not the strong form of free will. It's being dictated by the past.
So when you say the strong form of free will, I advocate for libertarian free will. Is that what you mean by the strong form?
I don't think so. No, I think because you could be as libertarian as possible in politics and
No. I'm not talking about politics. I'm saying like where there's a choice between A and B and someone can non-deterministically decide between those two things.
Yes, that's what I mean by non-deterministically, but non-deterministically has to mean that there is some kind of radical cut in the stream of consciousness, and a decision is made that is not the result of what came before it.
No, so not the result of what came before it. You're basically doing the same, making the same mistake Sam Harris does. And you're saying if there's cause and effect, it's always deterministic. The fact is something can be based on everything that came before it, but those decisions were non-deterministic and the current decision is non-deterministic. And that's what I would argue is the reality of life, is that if my essay defending free will is correct, our decisions are non-deterministic, meaning they're probabilistic. And if you come from a poor background, the chances are good that you won't be successful, but some people can overcome those probabilities through force of will. Now, we should make life better and easier for everyone. Again, I want to see a world where someone can choose to be an artist and still make six figures in modern USD dollars. But you know, like, does that make sense as the distinction between?
I totally agree, but I think that it doesn't demonstrate free will in the radical metaphysical sense.
No, I wasn't trying to demonstrate free will with tonight's examples. They were examples to show the strength of free will and how strong free will can be in changing the course of someone's future, from starting from a place that may seem like the things that they accomplished may seem hopeless. If you were a doctor of a guy with no arms and legs, and he told you he wanted to swim before this guy had done it, when no one in the past had ever done it, you probably would have laughed and said, there's no way you can do that, right? Like, no one would have thought anyone could do that. I would never have thought it. The guy's a better swimmer than me. Like, the guy's amazing. Like, and
If that was your point, you succeeded in demonstrating it, that these people are admirable and that
yes.
it can make a big difference. Yes.
And all I'm saying is that non-deterministic decisions can radically alter the course of our lives in ways that we would have thought unimaginable in some respects. And, you know, that doesn't mean, yeah, and I don't want to repeat myself, but that said, thank you, Albert, and for your comments. And Don John, go ahead.
All righty. I think this is most importantly is we're doing what they call an exercise in mental masturbation. There's no way to know.
Please be polite, Don John. Like, use
what none of those.
Mental masturbation is not a polite term, my friend.
What I mean by that is, if
I know what you mean by it, but it's not a polite way of saying it.
If we believe we know, may I finish, Garrett? May I finish? It's just a term to make an example. And the example is to claim that you know when it's not possible to know is absurd. And that's what I'm hearing here. Now, Albert is absolutely correct. He's following the same theories that Robert Sapolsky discussed. Sapolsky will say, well, if you can isolate that neuron that made that choice independent of all the other biological factors around it, then you can say there's free will. Now, I'm not arguing that there isn't any free will. So Albert is right on in that sense. You know, he's talking about radical free will. I believe, Garrett, you're talking about strong will as opposed to free will. And strong will would be a biological thing. Someone has a strong will to overcome certain things. That doesn't define that it's free, that there are choices involved in that where they went A or B. They followed their strong will, which was part of their nature and their nurture and their consumption, because those are three things that matter. It's not just nature, nurture, it's also consumption. Okay. Now, there's quite a number of studies out that studied orphans and adopted kids and that sort of thing. And there are many, many, many studies that show that many of these kids, in fact, some particular ones, it's been a while since I saw this, found themselves on the same path as their father. We're talking about all these people that did well. Well, what about, was it a free will for a young man? This is a study. I don't want to keep, oh God. Where he ends up in the same cycle as his father, okay, in prison. But he grew up in a wonderful family, adopted, etc. There are a lot of studies like that. So was that his free will, or was that a component of of nurture nature. And I will say that my brother is very much in that. My father's a severe alcoholic. My mother was a narcissist. He ruined his brain. Brilliant man, absolutely brilliant. Ruined his brain with alcohol, no matter what tried. I don't know that he had free will to do that or free will to get out of it. I don't necessarily think so. I think I got the lucky part of that. So that's about all I have to say. And excuse me, but I do think sometimes that when we start talking about things we can't know, that
Try
it
to
is
finish
an
your thought.
exercise in fun and joy, but we can't know.
So if you can write a proof for me about why we can't know it, I would love
can't
to
know.
read it.
Okay, I'll be happy to do.
And as far as isolating the non-deterministic neurons,
I mean,
that's already
Garrett, hang on. The thing is, you're using quantum physics. Quantum physics is a theory. You know, it's changing constantly. There's
I'm
no
not using quantum
absolute.
physics.
Well,
I'm
you did. You
explaining
were talking
quantum
about the double
physics.
slit experiment.
I'm explaining them, not using them to defend free will. I'm using
Okay.
free
I
will
hadn't
to
read your
explain
paper,
them.
so I've only glanced over it before the meeting.
Yeah.
So I can't say that.
I'm using free will to explain the double slit experiment and the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and
I don't see how you can do that.
quantum mechanics.
All right, that's fine.
So as far as isolating the non-deterministic neuron, that's already been done. Read the Hameroff and Penrose study on microtubules in the brain. I gave a reference to that in the presentation on free
You
will.
write that in, you type that into the chat?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of stuff.
Please.
So that said, thank you, Don John. Appreciate your opinion. And Pavel, go ahead.
Hey, Pavel from Australia. Yeah, I'll just build on what Don John said. I also don't really see that strong will can be conflated with free will. They do seem like kind of different things. Like you can have very strong-willed politicians and dictators of country, but I wouldn't say they're exerting free will, because free will to me seems like something that's necessarily exerting the moral choice over the immoral choice, choosing what is rational over what is irrational. So I'm just trying to understand like what sort of like will are we talking about when we talk about free will? It also seems to me that like people can gain a strong will not just through sheer willpower, but it's can be determined by something else. Like if you go to therapy, you can work on self-acceptance and things like that. And so it just seems to me like will is not this unitary thing. It's not always free, and yeah, it's not always like a causa sui, like it's not always an original cause. Yeah.
Yeah, so Pavel, I agree that, and I'm not conflating strong will with free will. Again, I presented defending that we have free will 4 weeks ago. That wasn't what tonight was about. Tonight was only about if you assume, and I said this in the beginning of the presentation, but everyone seems to be ignoring me, so I'm going to say it a third time or a fourth time at this point. Tonight, you have to assume that we have some sense of free will, and what I'm showing is how strong the will can be. That was all I was trying to do tonight, is to show how strong the will can be in some circumstances. The defense that we make non-deterministic decisions was done 4 weeks ago, and it's a much longer argument that I give a very brief summary of tonight, but I think I gave 5 or 7 minutes on it, and it was an hour presentation. There's a lot to it. So the other thing is, you're right, it's not just about strength of will, it's also about forming good habits. And so I've listened to a couple of book summaries on Blinkist recently, and they were talking about how forming good habits will lead you in a much better path in life. And actually, interestingly, it validated part of our FTI curriculum, because part of what I do is teach how to form positive habits in a way that will make you more likely to actually form those positive habits. And those positive habits will lead to achieving, getting closer to achieving your life's goals. And so it's not just about thinking with a strong will, it's about thinking smarter. And if you think smarter, you can be more successful at achieving the goals you want to in life. Does that make sense, Pavel? Oh, how did
Yeah. Pavel, it's totally up to you. It depends where you're from.
Okay.
Yeah, that does make sense. Like if there is free will, then we should expect it to be shown through our strength of will. You know, if we're like, if we have a choice to be rational, to be virtuous, to think logically, to believe the right things, to uphold the right things, then it should be shown through our action, which takes strength of will. So that does make sense.
Cool. Thank you. Mike, how are you?
If I were any better, well, I'd still be here. I'm going to try in about 5 sentences pull together Gödel's incompleteness theorem, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, free will, and determinism. Starting off, Gödel's original paper had a key word in it, and he described the conditions under which it's incomplete. And that key word is formal systems. It's true for a formal system. The world that we live in, the concept of a formal system is an approximate model to the world that we live in. So and so Gödel is not necessarily what we think it is. Now, for sure, causality, I think we all accept that causality is there. And if somebody didn't didn't create the stream of electrons or photons, we wouldn't have been able to measure the uncertainty. And so causality is there. Now, causality is very, very, very interconnected and complex. And it's complexity theory. Two identical twins raised by the same parent in the same house and the same household and going to the same poor school have not got the same story. Now, there is in AI, there is an experiment called Conway's Game of Life, which you can Google. And in my 5 sentences, I can't explain Conway's Game of Life. But it shows how very, very simple postulates, very, very simple actions, very, very simple changes in initial conditions, very simple changes in environment create entirely different solutions. And there's a sample program in if you Google Conway's Game of Life that shows why that's true and how that's true. So and that's in those statements, there's the tie-in of all those things I mentioned. A formal, for all practical purposes, you can define a system where you have a complete proof, but it's not rigorous, maybe by Gödel's things, and it's not rigorous because of the statement that he's talking
Try
about.
to finish your thought, Mike. We're at time.
Consider it finished.
Okay. So I don't understand why you think I don't understand Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Can you clarify that for me?
It's true for formal systems, and is the universe that we live in. I didn't say you didn't understand it, but I'm saying that because it goes from through all the steps that you did. But the thing that is not true is that the universe is not the formal system that Gödel described in his paper.
Well, no, he didn't apply it in the way that I am. That's the part that I'm adding that's new, is I'm applying it in a novel way.
Well, but you're saying it's not, but then you're saying you may not be able to apply it to. Okay, yeah, well, it's a good approximation, and in that sense, for practical purposes, your application and my application of Gödel in many situations is also good. but a rigorous mathematician would say we don't we're not applying it to the same kind of formal system that he's talking about. I'll have to look at what you said that because maybe just like last time you had a guy who said I didn't understand Schrodinger's wave equation, and he was right. No one understands Schrodinger's wave equation, but Feynman inched toward an understanding, and in my own way, I inched toward an understanding of Schrodinger's wave equation and a understanding of what a formal system is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as a formal system, you can apply like I think that my application of Gödel's is appropriate and accurate in the way that I apply it to the universe. But that's another story for another day because that we talked about on defending free will. That's not tonight's topic, so I'm not going to go into it in much detail. So, Rayhan, go ahead.
Yep. So I would like to start by saying I think free will itself is kind of an oxymoronic concept because will, for will to enact, it has to constrict itself. It has to constrict something. So it provides freedom for the individual or the will by constricting things around it. It's kind of like it remains at an equilibrium. But I know the point you're getting at, which is like the strength of will, which is think what we should be focusing on because that is where the truest sense of free will lies. Um, because when you try to decipher free will in any way, it does have to mean something related to cause. Because we're saying either it starts ex nihilo or it is something, a decision you can make from randomness. I think pure randomness isn't really a thing. It's always, if something is random and it occurs, that means something occurred. If something occurred in a specific way, that itself is an order. And things that seem random, orders that seem random, usually are just orders that have not spanned long enough to see the patterns within them. And I think most probabilities also are just they come from a lack of understanding the universe because we are a limited part of the universe. So of course, to understand, we would need probabilities. Um, to tie this into Gödel's incompleteness theorem, it makes sense that logic doesn't complete itself in a compressed form because if reality itself is the ultimate language of logic, if reality is the ultimate model, that means logic cannot fully exist in any point of itself, in any moment of itself. The fleshing out of logic would have to be the full logical equation. So, in that sense, I don't believe the strength of free will exists outside of reality or randomness, but we are a part of that reality. We are a part of that cause. And I think because we are the most complex beings in reality, the most complex parts, and complexity relates to a individuation. We are more distinct than anything else, and we can distinguish ourselves more than anything else. We can say that like our environment changes things, and this changes things, this changes things, but the fact is, in ratio, in proportion, the rock around me, the tree around me, I have more control over it than it has control over me. So when we say these things, we're getting the proportions wrong.